Hello and welcome to an overview of SEO Strategies and Skills, chapters 3 and 5. I mentioned in the course announcement last week that I would be doing a couple of videos this semester. Typically, this course is not doesn't have a big video component, but there are some chapters looking back from the last year that I think could use some additional context. So today I'm just going to be going through the chapters as they are in the courseware. Not going to go through the slides. I think that the chapter, it's easier for me to explain them in terms of the actual way that it's being written. So again, we're going to look at chapters 3 and 5 specifically this week. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. All right. So chapter 3 to start with, this is all about search engines, what they are, an overview. Some of this stuff is pretty easy. I think most of you are familiar with the search engines, what they are. We all use them today. The beginning of it isn't really important. It's about the anatomy of a search engine. The second part on crawling is a little bit more intense. Section 3 on crawling is about what search engines do. If you've ever heard of a search engine crawling a site, that is how a search engine actually looks at the content of a website. The way they call it a web crawler here, it's really just a way for Google to look at the content on your site. It's done by bots. And really, what it does is it collects the data, and then what it does is it indexes it. And so what indexing is this database of the Google's index is a database of all the websites and URLs that it could display. This is an example of an index where you have like a website and all of their different pages and how they are indexed. It has codes if it's good. Could they index it? Could it be crawled specifically? And then this is really what it does. Like indexing web pages is how Google determines, it collects all of the information and prepares it to be delivered to users when they are searching key terms. Some things like metadata, which is a term here, is information about a URL. Kind of like and honestly, metadata is stuff that you often see on Google search results, which is like a title of the page, a quick description, what the name of the company of the site is, and that really helps search engines out. By default, you can't edit it in most content management systems for websites. However, you can use plugins, especially on sites like WordPress, where you can update and change the metadata at your discretion. You can block pages from getting indexed and being crawled. Well, not being crawled, but when a web page is being crawled, you can tell the crawlers to not index it on Google. This is good for certain pages like thank you pages after somebody's made a purchase on your site. Could be for private or proprietary data that you only want seen by people with a URL. That's a pretty common thing. The thing is, it's good for you can say no index with content that you do not want the masses to potentially see. And you can check pretty easily if something is indexed appropriately, just going through here. There's also a program called Google Search Console that will be explained further throughout the course that helps with that too. Then once content is in the pages are indexed, that is when search results are served, in the words of the authors here. And what happens is you'll Google something, and if you see a page pop up, that is how search results are served. Not a lot of technical content in this section here. It's pretty basic. We'll talk a little bit more about how those things can be manipulated. Now, the section 5 is the last section that I did want to talk about a little bit, and that is the algorithm and ranking signal. Google has had several different ranking systems and algorithms over the years. You do not need to know all of these things. Really, the key thing, they go through so many of these things. The really important thing here is to know the background of what the algorithm does. And that is, the algorithm is how Google determines where a page ranks for certain keywords. The calculations of these help determine what the ordering is, the very coveted ordering, and that's really what all of this is about. Search engine optimization in itself is all about getting your content getting the algorithm to value your content more than anybody else's for a given term. Now, back in the day, Google used something called PageRank, which is where they would put the most high quality pages up at the top. A slew of lawsuits put an end to the PageRank era, and now that is based on algorithms. Now, today, there's a lot of different algorithm changes and updates that happen with Google. And for somebody like me who follows a lot of SEO people on LinkedIn, I hear about it all the time. Oh, Google's new algorithm is killing my traffic. But in reality, the algorithm has one goal, and it will continuously try to improve how it is meeting that goal. The goal is to provide its customers, the people that are searching, with the best content as quickly as possible. So if you're searching how to tie a tie, I've used this example several times already throughout several courses. Google wants the number one result to be something that is actually going to show you how to tie a tie. It's not going to be a long, drawn out blog post with thousands of words about tying a tie and then steps at the end. It's going to try to give you the data or the answer you're looking for as quickly as possible. Now, it doesn't actually know that. It can only base that ranking originally on the text that it sees, but it can look at user data and how they react to the content as well. So if you're number one for how to tie a tie, somebody comes to your site and immediately leaves after 5 seconds, that's going to work against you in your number one ranking. So it's important if you get that number one ranking that you are not only getting traffic to your site, but you're keeping them there and getting them to the answer that they are seeking, because that is what Google is trying to do. That is really an overview of chapter 3. It's pretty short, but I wanted to make sure that you understood the difference between what crawling is, how it turns in, how it then indexes content, and then how things are served, as well as what algorithms are. There's a lot of old algorithms listed in here, not something you need to know. Yeah, sure, the Panda update and the Penguin update were fun, but those are 10 plus years ago. Not something that you need to know today. Now, let's talk a little bit more about crawling. This is really where the technical SEO comes in. And I will say, of all the different types of SEO, this is where I am least well-versed, I should say. I consider SEO to be a focus area of mine and part of my expertise, but technical SEO is not my expertise, largely because you don't need to really know a lot of technical SEO anymore. If you look at this table of contents, technical SEO is the foundation of really this chapter. That's it. I guess you could say search engines as well. Site structure and key mapping maybe, but there's not a lot. You see most of the content in this book is based on on-page SEO, offsite SEO, and the other elements that go into it, local SEO, YouTube, and things like that. And there's only 2 learning objectives here. So it's going to be fast. However, I do think it's important for you to understand just how search engines work so that you are better informed as you move forward in your career. Now, the goal of the web crawler, again, is to navigate all of the content on your site. If a crawler cannot do that, your site will not be indexed by Google and it will not appear. You can check this in Google Search Console really easily. Now, the one thing I will say here is knowledge of it. They claim that knowledge of the site of SEO is important when working with large and more complex websites. It's also important to know this for smaller websites, because if you just build a website and you're trying to get it to appear somewhere on Google, you need to make sure that Google can crawl the site. Now we go into indexing. There's a long history of all of this. You can feel free to look at this. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail of it. I would like to start here. Mobile first indexing. And this is that Google is going to look at your mobile website pages before it looks at desktop pages. That is, it wants to look at your page as it is going to display on a cellular device. That usually is about 300 pixels wide, and then it could be as long as necessary. This is really important for you to know because if you were to create a website, you won't in this class, but when creating a website, you really do need to think about mobile first. And what does that mean? Thinking about mobile first means you need to design a website for how it looks on a phone, and then you can expand it out to show what it looks like on a desktop. For years, and I would argue even today, most web developers will claim that they're mobile first, but in reality, they are desktop first. I couldn't tell you why. I think it's easier. It's easier to start big and then scale down, whereas when you are designing a site, it's harder to start small and then add more bells and whistles later. It may sound counterintuitive, but trust me, as somebody who has designed a lot of websites, it is not. So mobile indexing, what this just means is making sure that your content is going to be easily consumed by people reading on a phone. Those of you that are in the user experience design course are going to know a little bit what I'm talking about here, in that the text needs to be large enough to be legible. You need to be able to quickly scroll with your fingers, and you need to be able to have a mobile designed menu. This is a great graphic to show the difference. This one on the left with the red X is what you would see on a not mobile designed website. Over here on the right is one that is. The clear menu, image, search bar, and then the text. Over here, text is so small you have to just zoom in to see anything. Now, when I say mobile designed, I actually mean responsive. And that is, now websites can be coded in such a way that how it looks here on the right is great, but then if you expand the window on the desktop to be full width, the content will respond to the new size of the browser and then show you more stuff. The one on the left is not mobile friendly. That is just shoving one size fits all onto a small scale browser. So that is really the essence of responsive design here. For you to, if you ever want to see if something is responsive, go to the very top right of your browser and click the restore down, and then just grab the corner and go up and down and see if the content moves with the window. If not, and it just shrinks all at once, and it's just like it's just like you're zooming out and out and out, then it's not responsive. It is responsive when you see it's almost like when you justify text and like text starts moving and suddenly a menu looks a little bit different. If it looks like a menu is, if it looks like the site is transforming in front of your eyes as you resize the actual site, that's where you're going to see that it's responsive. I won't go into too much more detail here. There are XML sitemaps, HTML sitemaps, and these are questions on the quiz, I will say. However, when it comes to the exam, for example, you're not going to need to know about an XML sitemap. You're not going to need to know an HTML sitemap. And honestly, if you start a website today, you're not going to need them. There are enough tools out there that exist that will do all of this for you automatically for free, that you should not need to waste your time on this stuff. This is one thing at the very bottom I did want to mention. Breadcrumb navigation is nice from a user experience perspective and from a technical SEO perspective. And that is, if you have multiple layers of pages, breadcrumbs are showing the layers of pages. So this is a page on advanced SEO. Under advanced SEO is part of their documentation, which is part of Google Search Central, which is under their homepage. So think of the page as being think of the breadcrumbs as being how somebody navigates to your page, to that page from the homepage. It's really good for people for having a really good user experience, because then it allows people to not only see how they got to that page, but then they can go back and visit any of those other ones. If we move to section 3, optimization focal points, you do not need to know the robot text files. Again, you still have to read it. You might need to know it for the quiz. I didn't create the quizzes. Those are something that may come up for you. Meta rollback tags, not important. Canonical tags, I mean, I guess to give you an actual idea, this is something that's somewhat important. A canonical page is when there are is kind of like, I don't know, for those of you who are familiar with like Game of Thrones and Star Wars and Avengers, like Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff. Things that are canon are things that actually happened in the process. Like, oh yeah, that movie, the Thor: Love and Thunder is not canon, but the villain is canon, but the actual story is, you know, something like that. That just means it's part of something that's canon, is part of the real world. Like it's actual, like it's the main thing. Canonical tags is similar to that in that something is if a page has a canonical tag, then it is the authoritative page. It is the absolute, like that is the page that should be indexed. That is the main one that kind of flows with the rest of the story. You're never going to need to know this unless you have a lot of pages that have very similar content. And what that could, honestly, it's hard for me to come up with examples, but it really helps to eliminate duplicate content, and then it helps from keeping visitors going to too many different pages. If you want people just to go to one page that has like all of the main stuff on it, that's what the canonical tag is for. Going down, an SSL certificate, this is not something you should have to know anymore, but this is the difference between an HTTP and an HTTPS. Fun fact, Google is going to crush websites that don't have an HTTPS. The S is the SSL. That's just an added layer of security, and it communicates to Google essentially that this is a secure website. They're pretty cheap, and they come with most of the web builders that you would use. If you go to Squarespace and you build a website today and you go live, it's going to come with an SSL. Honestly, there aren't very many sites anymore that don't have SSLs, and those that don't, you should probably be concerned about. There's always the redirects here that they talk about too. The last piece here is international SEO basics. The idea here is they really just talk about how you're going to have different sites for different locations. You've probably seen something, you know, Europe, most of you are based in Minnesota or North Dakota. I'm based in Michigan. We've probably seen Canadian websites, some, you know, site.com/CA, which is just Canada. Here they show a bunch of different ones. You can use this to establish languages, to establish locations, and they can all work in the same, you know, one top level domain, which is like, hey, site.com is the top level domain, and all of the other languages and locations fall under that. That's perfectly fine. That's really good when it comes to crawling and indexing sites. You can have different ones as well. You know, this is where the .ca comes in. Site.ca would be, okay, this site lives on its own in Canada. That's just a, you know, differentiation. When it comes to translations and other languages, again, not something that most of you will deal with. However, there is this is a whole strategy in itself, you know, determining what languages to translate into and how to make that available. Some sites have different translations available in the upper right corner of the site, like, hey, I'd rather see this in Espanol. Sometimes you can use Google Translate. You know, that's a pretty easy thing, although it doesn't always have the most accurate translations. But overall, it is something to consider if you have customers outside of the United States. The sitemap and the href language tag, I'm not gonna test you on that. You know, you're getting really, really into the weeds here with technical SEO. If anything, hopefully this video helps separate what you need to know and what you will not need to know when it comes to the exam. Again, the quiz, it does get a little technical when it comes to this chapter. And in looking at you actually don't have to do the chapter 5 quiz. You do have the chapter 3 quiz, but you don't have to do the chapter 5. So you don't have to worry about this. But yeah, I mean, if you look at chapter 5, the big things, you know, what are the goals of crawlability, some of the basics, how it works. And then when you're looking at optimizing, you know, you want to prevent duplicate content, and the SSLs are important. And really that's about it. Chapters 3 and 5, this is the most technical we'll get the whole semester with search engine marketing. And it is something that I wanted to make sure to address before we get much further. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you are a technical SEO person, please let me know. I would love to chat with you about kind of what your day-to-day is like, because it's something that, while you can get by without it, it helps to have that knowledge so that when the time comes that you do need to really get your hands dirty and dig into a site, you know what to do and you can get through. But like all the other topics here, a lot of this is trial and error, testing things out, seeing how Google reacts to it. And when it comes down to it, the rest of this textbook is about strong content and providing value to people who can find your stuff. However, that's never going to happen if you don't have a grasp of the technical side of it. So that is all for now. And hopefully this helps you out a little bit as you move forward this week with technical SEO.